When I heard the faint clinking of metal behind the fence, I thought it was just the neighbor's dog again. But then I heard it, a cry. My daughter's cry. I ran across the yard, heart pounding, and what I saw will haunt me forever. My little girl, trembling, locked inside a rusty cage behind Karen's house, her knees scraped, her eyes red from tears. The same HOA Karen who lectured everyone about community discipline now had my child imprisoned like an animal. I screamed her name, rattled the padlock, and when Karen appeared holding the keys with that smug smile, I knew she'd crossed a line no apology could ever fix. She said, "You people need to learn the rules." But she had no idea. This time, she would learn what justice really feels like. Before I continue, tell me, which city are you watching from? Before I tell you how this all unfolded, take a second to comment your city down below. I want to see where you're watching from, and if stories of justice hitting back at cruelty matter to you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the truth behind what happened next. My name is Daniel Brooks, and 2 months ago, my quiet neighborhood in Cedar Pines turned into something straight out of a nightmare. I moved here to give my daughter, Lily, a peaceful life. She's 12, bright, gentle, and lives with mild cerebral palsy. All she ever wanted was to feel normal, to play with her dog in the backyard without being stared at. But Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, decided our kind didn't fit her version of neighborhood standards. She complained about everything. Our ramp being too ugly, our fence too low, even the sound of Lily's therapy swing. She called herself a protector of order. But to me, she was something else. A control freak hiding cruelty behind HOA rules, and I should have known the day she took photos of my daughter from across the fence. That something darker was coming, because what started as petty harassment would soon spiral into a crime that shook the whole community. Now let's start from the beginning. The signs I missed, and the warning I ignored. It started small, like most nightmares do. At first, I thought Karen's obsession with the HOA was just another example of suburban boredom. She'd stop me on my way to work with that clipboard glued to her hand and say things like, "Daniel, your trash cans were visible from the street for 5 extra minutes yesterday," or "The ramp you built for your daughter violates the visual harmony clause." Visual harmony. That's what she called accessibility. At first, I laughed it off. You can't reason with people who crave control. But it wasn't funny when Lily came home one afternoon, pale and shaken, saying, "Dad, that lady yelled at me again." Apparently, Karen had stopped her while she was watering the flowers and scolded her for wasting community resources. My daughter, who spent months learning to hold a watering can steadily, was left trembling, and, ashamed, I went over that evening to talk. Karen's porch light flickered as she opened the door, her lips pressed tight in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You need to teach your daughter boundaries," she said flatly. "This is a respectable neighborhood." I told her to leave Lily alone. She just smirked and closed the door in my face. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I'd find anonymous HOA warnings taped to my door, citations for noise, improper storage, unapproved decorations. The strangest part? Each letter had the same sharp handwriting, underlined 3 times in red ink. Karen's Lily grew afraid to go outside. She'd ask if she could play in the yard only when Miss Karen wasn't looking. I told her not to worry, but deep down I was starting to. Because Karen wasn't just watching anymore, she was documenting. I caught her once standing behind our fence, phone raised, taking pictures of Lily's wheelchair ramp. When I confronted her again, she crossed her arms and said, "If your property lowers our value, it's my business." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules or aesthetics. It was personal. I started locking the gate every night, double-checking windows, even leaving a light on outside. I thought that would be enough. But a week later, when I came home early from work, I saw something that froze my blood. Karen standing in her backyard, pointing toward our house, whispering to 2 HOA members. Their faces were grim, nodding as if she were briefing them for a mission. That night, Lily asked me, "Dad, am I a bad neighbor?" I didn't know how to answer. I hugged her instead and promised, "You did nothing wrong." I didn't realize it then, but Karen had already crossed the line. She just hadn't shown how far she was willing to go. And soon I'd find out in the most horrifying way imaginable. It was a Thursday, the kind of day that feels too normal to ever become a nightmare. The sun was out, birds were loud, and Lily had just finished her online therapy session. She wanted to take her dog Daisy outside to play. I remember her laughing, saying, "Just 10 minutes, Dad. Promise I'll stay close." I nodded and went inside to finish a work call. 10 minutes turned into 20, then 30. When I realized how quiet it had become, something in my gut twisted, the kind of silence that feels wrong. I called out, "Lily?" Nothing. Checked the backyard. Empty. Daisy's leash was lying near the porch, snapped clean. Panic hit like electricity. I ran out the front door, scanning up and down the street, calling her name again and again until my throat burned. Then I saw it, Karen's backyard gate. It was slightly open, creaking in the wind, and through the slats I heard it. A faint clinking sound, like metal chains brushing against metal. My heart nearly stopped. I pushed the gate open. At first I didn't see her. Then the sound came again, a whimper. I turned toward the side of the shed and froze. My daughter was in a cage, a rusted, dog-sized cage sitting under a tree, half covered with a tarp. Lily was crouched inside, her knees scraped, her arms shaking, her little hands clutching the bars. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. I dropped to my knees and pulled at the padlock until my fingers bled. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Don't touch that, Daniel," Karen said, stepping out from behind the shed. She was holding the keys in one hand and a glass of lemonade in the other, as calm as if she were discussing gardening. I shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" She tilted her head, unmoved. "Your daughter needs to learn boundaries. She came onto HOA property. I warned you. She's 12, I yelled, tears blurring my vision. Karen shrugged. Rules don't change based on age. That was it. I lunged forward, ready to break that lock, but Karen held up her phone. "Touch it," she sneered, "and I'll call the police." "On you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My daughter whimpered, whispering, "Dad, I'm scared." That sound, that single trembling word, snapped something inside me. I roared, grabbed a nearby shovel, and smashed the lock. The door flew open, and Lily collapsed into my arms. That's when Karen screamed, "You'll regret this!" But before she could finish, sirens filled the street. The neighbor across from us, an older man named Greg, had seen everything from his window and already called 911. As officers flooded the yard, Karen kept shouting about HOA jurisdiction and private property rights. She was still holding the lemonade, still acting like this was all justified. But when they handcuffed her, she finally dropped the glass. It shattered across the pavement, the same way her perfect little world was about to. I held my daughter close as the blue lights flashed around us. That was the night everything changed. The night the neighborhood found out what their precious HOA president had truly become. The police cars lit up the whole street that night like a crime scene from a movie. Neighbors stood outside their porches, whispering, clutching their phones, recording as officers led Karen away in handcuffs. But even then she didn't look scared. She looked offended, like the world had wronged her. When Detective Harris approached me, I was still holding Lily, her body trembling against my chest. "We'll take it from here, sir," he said gently, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. They photographed the cage, took the lock and the chains, and marked off Karen's backyard with yellow tape. I just stood there in disbelief that something so monstrous could happen 10 feet from our home. At the hospital, the doctors treated Lily's bruises and dehydration. The psychologist said she might suffer trauma for months. When they asked who did this, Lily whispered, "The lady with the pink nails." The same color Karen always wore. By morning, the story had already spread. A neighbor named Greg had posted the footage from his security camera online. It showed Karen dragging the cage across the yard, muttering about punishment and teaching respect. Within hours, it went viral. Thousands of people demanded justice. Karen's attorney tried to spin it, saying she had a mental episode and that the child wandered into her yard unsupervised. But the evidence told a different story. HOA emails surfaced showing Karen's repeated complaints about my daughter's unsightly behavior and disrupting the visual order. I sat through interview after interview, every word feeling heavier than the last. The prosecutor told me this was no misunderstanding. This was false imprisonment and child endangerment. Meanwhile, the rest of the HOA tried to distance themselves. They said Karen acted independently, but a few of them had been seen helping her days earlier. The same people I'd seen whispering with her near the fence. That's when one brave board member, Rachel, came forward. She told detectives that Karen had been planning to teach the Brooks family a lesson after I refused to repaint my ramp. She'd even joked about putting the kid where she can't break anything. That statement changed everything. The charges went from misdemeanors to full felony counts. I remember standing outside the courthouse the next morning, holding Lily's hand as reporters crowded around. All I said was, no parent should ever have to find their child in a cage. The video of that moment got millions of views, but for me, it wasn't about cameras or headlines. It was about making sure Karen never had the chance to hurt another child again. Still, part of me couldn't sleep at night. Every creak, every sound outside brought the image back. My daughter's small hands gripping those cold bars. The real fight, though, was just beginning. In the courtroom, where Karen would finally face the truth she'd spent her life hiding behind HOA rules. And when she took the stand, the world finally saw the monster she'd been pretending not to be. The courthouse was packed the day the trial began. News vans lined the street, reporters fighting for camera space, and protesters stood outside with signs that read, "Justice for Lily." Inside, the air felt heavy, thick with whispers and anger. I held my daughter's hand as we took our seats behind the prosecution table. She squeezed my fingers 3 times, our silent way of saying I'm okay. But I could feel the tremor in her hand. When Karen entered, she wasn't in her polished HOA attire anymore. Gone was the neon orange dress and pearl necklace. She wore a gray suit, hair tied tight, face blank. But her eyes, those cold, self-righteous eyes that were still the same. She glanced back at the gallery, searching for sympathy. She didn't find any. The prosecutor started with the footage. Grainy security video showing Karen dragging the cage, chain clinking in rhythm with her muttering voice. The courtroom fell silent as the audio played. "You'll stay here until you learn respect?" The judge's expression froze. Lily buried her face in my arm. Even Karen's lawyer looked pale. When it was my turn to testify, my throat tightened. I described finding the cage, the sound of my daughter crying, the way Karen stood there, calm, proud, almost pleased. Every word scraped my throat raw, but I kept going. "She called it discipline," I said, voice trembling. "But no law, no HOA rule gives you the right to cage a child." Karen's defense tried everything, claimed she suffered a mental breakdown, that she thought she was protecting property, that it was an accident. But then Rachel, the former HOA board member, took the stand. She told the court everything, the meetings, the threats, the plan to make an example out of us. Her voice cracked as she said, "We laughed when she joked about it. I didn't think she'd actually do it." That confession sealed the case. When the verdict came, the entire room held its breath. The judge looked straight at Karen and said, "You weaponized authority against innocence. You treated a child as less than human. This court finds you guilty of false imprisonment, child abuse, and aggravated assault." Karen didn't flinch. But when she turned to face the crowd and saw no one, not one person, looking at her with pity, only disgust, her composure cracked. As officers led her away, she muttered, "I was only enforcing order." The judge replied quietly, "You destroyed it." Outside, the sky broke into rain, the kind that feels like cleansing. Reporters swarmed, but I didn't stop to talk. I just lifted Lily into my arms and whispered, "It's over." But deep down, I knew the damage she'd done would take years to heal. Still, that day marked the moment the world finally saw the truth. Karen's rules weren't about keeping peace. They were about control, cruelty, and pride. And now justice had finally found her. After the trial, life in Cedar Pines would never be the same. The HOA that once ruled every lawn and mailbox dissolved within a week of the verdict. Most of its members resigned quietly, pretending they hadn't stood beside Karen's cruelty for years. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood actually felt human. Children's laughter replaced the constant sound of Karen's barking orders, and people began to talk to each other instead of filing complaints. Lily needed months of therapy. Nightmares would wake her at 3 a.m., and she'd run to my room crying, afraid she'd done something wrong again. Each time I'd hold her close and remind her, "You're safe now. Nobody's ever going to lock you away again." Those words became a promise, not just to her, but to every parent who's ever had to fight for their child's dignity. The community, once divided by rules and fear, came together to help rebuild what she destroyed. Greg, the neighbor who had called 911, started a GoFundMe for Lily's medical care. Strangers from across the country donated, leaving comments like, "For Lily, stay strong, and justice matters." It was overwhelming. For every ounce of cruelty Karen showed, kindness came back tenfold. Months later, something beautiful happened. The mayor's office called. They wanted to turn the old HOA park, the same one where Karen used to hold her mandatory order meetings, into a new public space dedicated to children with disabilities. They asked me to help design it. I remember the day it opened. The sun shone through the trees, the air smelled like new wood chips, and Lily stood in her new wheelchair-accessible swing, smiling wider than I'd seen in months. The sign beside the gate read, "Lily's Garden, where every child belongs." That moment hit harder than any verdict or sentence ever could. Because justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing. It's about proving that compassion outlasts cruelty. Karen might have spent her life building fences, drawing lines, enforcing limits, but my daughter's name now stood above a gate that welcomed everyone. I looked around and saw neighbors who once ignored us, now cheering, clapping, some even crying. And in that crowd, I realized something simple. Hate isolates, but empathy unites. Lily tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Dad, can we invite the kids next door?" I smiled. "That's the whole point, sweetheart." As the laughter of children filled the park, I finally let go of the fear that had haunted me for months. Karen's chapter was closed. But ours had just begun. If you believe no child deserves to live in fear, then make this moment matter. Hit that subscribe button and comment "Justice Won" down below. Every story I tell here is more than words. It's a stand against cruelty disguised as authority, and a reminder that even one voice can bring change. Karen thought she could use rules to cage innocence. But what she never understood is this: love breaks every lock. Share this story so the world sees what happens when ordinary parents refuse to stay silent. Because somewhere out there, another family might be fighting the same silent war, and your share, your comment, your voice might give them hope. I'm Daniel Brooks, and this was my story. My daughter found freedom, and so can every child. Let's make sure no one ever builds another cage again.